Sorry, that's
Welcome
bugging
back to
me.
the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm the founder of the Empower Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. Today, we're going to be doing a mini podcast with one of the authors of my anthology book that's coming out on Sunday, November 23rd. The anthology is called The Empower Grief Journey 23 Stories of Grief that Carved a New Path Forward. And today's author highlight is with Jill McClennen. Her chapter is number 23 and is called Where Her Hands Once Were, where she shares a powerful story about going through the loss of her grandmom. And I was really excited personally. This is the book, guys, if you guys can see it. I was excited to have Jill's book as number 23 because she and I connected on a podcast earlier this year. And she's been I'm glad to call her a friend in many aspects because we've connected through grief and loss and have stayed connected in the grief community over the last year. And her story, I put it on number 23 on purpose, and I'll share with you guys when you do get this book and read it. It's a very, very powerful chapter, and so I'm excited for everybody to read it. But I wanted it on number 23 because, as you guys know, my son Caden was born on 23, and I just wanted a powerful story to end on that number. And so,
Hmm.
Jill, without further ado, welcome to the podcast.
Aw, thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk to you about the term grandmom because I feel like we all have different names for our grandparents. I was brought up with grandma. Is grandmom an East Coast term for grandma?
It's interesting because I didn't realize that grandmom was not a real thing until I started trying to type it in, and autocorrect always wants to get rid of the D. But I didn't call her grandmom. She was grandmom. Like, that's just what I called her. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that you just say it all the time and you don't really think about the fact that other people don't say it. So it maybe is an East Coast thing, but I know people have different terms, for what they call their grandparents. But yeah, I don't know. She was just my grandmom. That's what she was. I don't know.
I just really love that because when I read through your chapter, there's just this very heart touch moment when you reference her like that through your
Mm.
chapter. And so, what I'd love for you to do to start out the podcast is I'd love for you to share a little bit of background of your story about this woman who I can tell shaped your life in a lot of ways while she was here. And also tell us a little bit about your chapter in the book.
Yeah, my grandmother, oh my gosh, I just adored that woman. And everybody else did too, which I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, everybody loved them, but like legitimately, everybody that she came in contact with really loved her. She was kind, she was generous, she was giving. She didn't have a lot, grew up on a farm in South Jersey, married my grandfather, like working class. She didn't have a lot, but she always gave to everyone whatever she could. And when I was born, my mom was a single mom. She was working. My grandmother stepped right in and was like, all right, I'm going to take care of the baby. And so that was most of my life when I think of after schools and when I think of, all the different times of summertime when I was home. It's always with my grandmother. It was always in her house or her taking me to the pool, doing all these things with me. And I remember when I went away to college, I actually had a tarot card reading done. And I asked the tarot reader, I was like, my grandmother and I are really close, and I'm moving far away, and I'm really worried about leaving and that, she's going to die while I'm away. And the woman was like, no, you don't have to worry about that. She's going to be around for a while. And I was like, all right. And the woman was right. She was around for a while. I went away to college. I moved all over the place, all up and down the East Coast, eventually moved to California. And throughout that time, especially when cell phones became a real thing, so that'll tell you how old I am, right? Like when like cell phones were more commonly used, I would call my grandmother literally every day. I would walk to work and I would talk to my grandmother. I would be washing clothes in the laundromat and I would be chatting away to my grandmother. I mean, she was my person that I would call just whenever I wanted to talk about anything, whether it was good or it was bad, any questions that I ever had. She taught me how to do all kinds of things from how to properly hang clothes on a clothesline, like one of those things you don't really think there's technique to it, but there's definitely technique to it. My green thumb on my plants, my garden. I mean, it's just like so much of my life was shaped by her and what she believed and the way that she treated people really influenced me. I really grew up watching her treat everybody with kindness, and it definitely influenced who I am today. And so then when she was getting ready to turn 90, I was living in California, My husband and I, we had just gotten married and we were like, we want to open a bakery. And she said, why don't you move home to New Jersey and you could move in with me? And then I get to stay in my house that my grandfather had built for her when they got married in 1936, I believe. And this was 2006. So she'd lived in that house a real long time and she didn't want to leave it. And I was like, sounds like a plan. So picked up my husband, my cat, packed a minivan, drove across the country from San Francisco to New Jersey. But pretty shortly after we got home, she found out she had cancer. And so I spent the last 4 years of her life living with her and caring for her and watching just like the changes that she went through, the even her personality changed, like just a lot of things really changed for her over those 4 years. But it really felt to me like a gift that I was able to give her, to be there for her when she needed somebody the most, the way that she was there for me my entire life. And we were really close up until, the last couple weeks of her life when she started to get a little bit confused. She didn't even know who I was a lot of the time, those last few weeks. But up until then, even she was the first person I told I was pregnant when I found out I was pregnant. And I went into her room and I like showed her the little stick. And she was just like, oh my gosh, and I spent the 9 months that I was pregnant, every night I would go and I would sit in her room and we would just talk. And like, it was such a important time for me. It was an important time for her. And I do think that that helped with my grieving process as well, of being able to be there with her so much and to care for her and to give back to her allowed me to have some of the conversations that I wanted to have. And that was something when I was writing the chapter for the book, I revisited the blogs that I had written because anybody that's, first off, I had a 6-month-old baby at that point, and I was caregiving my grandmother. So anybody that's been in either of those phases knows that years away, it's kind of blurry, it's kind of fuzzy. You don't get a lot of sleep, you're exhausted, right? Like there was a lot of moments I didn't remember. So at that time, I had written a blog because I just needed to get it out. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to just vent at my husband about how hard it was. I didn't want to vent to my mother about how hard it was. I just needed to get it out. And so I started a blog. And when I was writing my chapter of the book, I was like, I'm going to revisit and like see some of the things that I maybe don't remember. And there was a lot of beautiful moments that I just didn't remember, conversations that I'd had with her, that really, I think, gave her closure. I can look back on it now, knowing what I know, and see how important those conversations were for probably both of us, to allow her to get to the place where she was ready to let go until she was ready to move on. And so for me, like writing my chapter in the book, it was beautiful because I was able to revisit, and there was times I definitely cried. I sobbed through parts of it, reading these things and like writing out my story, but writing it from a place where I was imagining what my grandmother would be saying to me. Part of her would be shaking her head, like, I can't believe you're talking about me, Jill. Like, why are you telling everybody about me? Like, I'm not special. I was just an old lady, like I could hear all the things. But it was so beautiful to be able to imagine her reading this chapter and hearing the things that I was saying and seeing what I've done with my life. It's been, I don't know, she died in 2011, so we're like talking 15 years since she died. And so much has changed, and it really put me on the path that I'm on today because of that experience. So like writing the chapter, I found it healing and beautiful and just such a wonderful way for me to really honor my relationship with her and honor the path that I'm on because of her. And I hope, I don't know, maybe she is somewhere where she can see me and she knows. I hope she knows how much her life and her death impacted me and my life and where I'm at now.
You hit on something really beautiful that I went through writing my own chapters, that you had these conversations with your grandmom many years ago. And as you're writing through this chapter, you're reliving a lot of those moments and reflecting back on a lot of things that they've said, the conversations you've had, things they've said to you, and you see it from 15 years after the fact or 20 years after the fact. And maybe back then in that moment, like you said, when you've got a 6-month-old infant and you're being a caregiver at the same time, life is a really blurry at that point. There's a hard time of, I don't think being present's the right phrasing of it, but your mind is in so many places, it's hard to really understand what's going on. And then you look back and you say, wow, actually, I did understand that, or wow, that really meant a lot to me in that moment. And now I get this kind of thing. I was having reflections of that, thinking about my grandfather this last week. I said, there's things he said to me when I was 18 years old that I was like, I don't even understand this. I don't get it. And now I'm like twice that age. I'm going, yeah, okay, that made sense. I get it.
Uh-huh.
So I just love that you had that reflection going through the book. And I really do think in a lot of ways your grandmom prepped you for the path that you're on right now, where you're a death doula. I don't know if our audience knows that, but Jill's a death doula. She helps people with the end stages of life and helping people navigate that because that's a very uncertain place that we're not very prepared for. We don't talk about much and we kind of try to hide it even though we know it's going to happen. It's a reality. And so Jill's there for us in the moments of life where we're in full out panic mode, don't know what to expect. It's completely uncertain. She brings that peace and calm into that moment and is there to help guide us in many ways. What do you think your grandma would say to you today after being in a book, writing a chapter about her and how many people you've helped in the end of stage process?
I think out of anybody in my life, she was always the one that believed in me the most. So I think part of her would not be surprised that I am really taking an experience that was difficult for me because I didn't understand what was happening. It was confusing and it was overwhelming. And I was like, you know what? I want to make it better for other people. So I think she wouldn't be surprised. But also, again, I think sometimes she would shake her head and just be like, why are you talking about me so much like this? She was so humble about everything. Um, but I think for her, knowing that I'm helping people have a better experience and potentially helping people feel more comfortable around end of life, she would be really honored. I think it was important for her again to always make everybody feel loved and cared for and welcomed. That was just the way that she lived her life. And so this just seems like like an extension of her philosophy. Actually, one of the things I have tattooed over my heart is a line from a poem that she wrote. I found it the day after she died. I was looking for something in her nightstand and I found this piece of paper. And I literally went right to the tattoo shop and I was like, my grandma just died. Can you tattoo this on me? And he was like, okay, are you sure? And I was like, I'm 100% sure. So, like 2 days after she died, I was in the shop getting it tattooed on. But the line says, life is a journey and love is your fuel. And it just, really seemed like her philosophy in life, that that's what she just always would say to me, that like this too shall pass, Jill. Anytime things are difficult, it's just part of the journey, it's part of life. Just make sure you keep showing up with love and happiness as much as you can and showing people love. And I think that's what I do with my work. And I think she would be really proud of me. Again, I hope she can see me wherever she is. Like, hi, Grandma. Hopefully you're watching. Hopefully she can see all of it.
What? One of my big questions I ask on my podcast, and I think it's appropriate for you in so many ways. When you look back at your 20-year-old self and you see where you are today, all the things that you've gone through, that beautiful relationship you had with your grandmom over the years, what would you tell your 20-year-old self to look forward to in the future?
Oh my gosh, my 20-year-old self, that was a an actual really low point for me. 2021 was probably my like rock bottom out of all of my life, right? And so if I could go back to like that time period and tell myself just all the things that I would be able to accomplish and how much the negative things in my life, the negative experiences, actually was like fuel for my fire to get even more done and to show up for even more people and to just remind myself that again, this is part of the journey, it's part of the human experience. Like this is it, right? Maybe reincarnation's real. I don't know for sure. But as far as I know, this is the only life I have. And if I didn't have negative experiences, I wouldn't be able to appreciate the positive ones as much. And so all of it's just part of the journey. I'm just going to experience it as best as I can. But the 20-year-old Jill really did not know that. She was she was not doing so good. But I look back on it now and I wouldn't change any of it because it really did get me to where I'm at today.
I think that's really beautiful to say because 2021 for me was not a good chapter in my life in many ways. So I
Yeah.
could resonate with you on that. But I think it's just beautiful to see who we become later on in life. And I love that your grandmom said the same phrase my grandfather used to say. He grew up in the 30s in the Dust Bowl in North Dakota, and he'd always say that line, "This too shall pass." He always
Yeah.
would say that.
Yeah.
Um, Jill, I wanted to ask you, how do you hope that people will learn from your story or take away from your story that grief doesn't have to be something negative in our life. It doesn't have to be a very heavy thing. It can be something that we can all celebrate and find positive moments like you're talking about.
That was where, when I first started writing the chapter, I was kind of like, I don't really know where I'm going to go with this, right? Like I'm trying to get clear on what I want people to understand. And throughout writing it, it really just got clear to me that grief is part of the human experience. We can't escape it, even if we want to. But the best thing that we can do is be present for it fully, to listen to it, to acknowledge it, to see what it wants us to understand, what it wants us to feel, what it wants us to know, and not push it away, which is what we're taught to do. We're taught to just push away anything that's negative, that doesn't feel good. It won't last forever. Yes, you will always miss your person, but that heavy, painful, like literally racks your whole body with emotion and feelings, that will pass. But the best way to get it to pass is to just honor it and to really feel it. And so that's why at the end of my chapter, I really tried to give people some tools they can use and some guidance on just how you can feel this grief without getting overwhelmed by it. And then it gets to a place where now I still miss my grandmother every day. There's almost every single day, there's something that I'm like, man, I wish I could ask grandma about this. Like, I wish I could talk to grandma about this. And I can't. And that's okay. But I don't feel that heavy, overwhelming grief that I felt at the beginning, where I just couldn't imagine how I would live without this person in my life that had been such a steady presence for me. So that's really what I want people to understand, that this is part of the human experience. And if we can honor that and listen to it and sit with it and use the tools that we have to make it a little bit easier without bypassing it or pushing it away, it can really become a transformational part of your life that can really change you and put you on the path that you were really meant to be on, that you would not have necessarily chosen if you didn't have that experience.
I appreciate you saying that because when I read through your chapter and I read through it probably 5 or 10 times through the writing process,
Yeah.
I always felt that way at the end of reading your chapter because I've had a very intense grief losing Caden, and it's hard to control sometimes. It's very hard. But when I read your chapter, that's what I loved about it, and that's why it's number 23 in the book, is that when you get to the end of Jill's chapter, when you guys read it, it's this very calming, soothing overtone of what grief can feel like and what it can become. And you kind of get out of the intensity of things in many ways, and it moves you into this place of acceptance and love and kindness that Jill's talked about today on the podcast. And so it was just a perfect way to round out the book, to be very honest. And it was something that really it connected with me on a very deep emotional level. So I'm really excited for you guys to read Jill's chapter in the book. I'm going to show you guys the book again so you can see it when it comes out. I'm also going to show you guys Jill's cover real quick. So this is going to be the chapter title.
Hmm.
And when you guys get done reading her chapter, what I want you guys to know is that there's also an author bio page on the back. And so you guys will see a picture of her, her bio, and there's also her website links and a QR code to visit her website and connect with her. And Jill, that leads us to my last question as we wrap up the podcast. If people want to connect with you and learn more about what you do, where can they find you? And can you also tell us about your podcast?
Sure. So my business name is End of Life Clarity. You can find me on all social medias as well as my website is just at End of Life Clarity. And I am pretty active on Facebook. So you can just search my name, Jill McClennen, on Facebook. If you send me a friend request or whatever they call it, I will accept it unless you're super creepy, then I won't. But everybody else, I will accept it. And I do love to connect with people on Facebook. I find it's a good way to chat and get to know people. So for sure, find me on those. And my podcast is called Seeing Death Clearly, kind of a little play on the name of my business. It's on all major podcast platforms. I'm slowly but surely getting them onto YouTube. But I talk to people about death, dying, grief, but really more about how we live life with the reality that those things exist. So I talk to professionals. I've talked to people that have written books. I've talked to just normal everyday folks that are like, I want to share my story about death and how it influenced my life. I love the podcast. I think it's pretty good. So, hopefully people will check it out.
Well, I love your podcast, and I will share with listeners today who are listening to the podcast. Jill does an awesome job on Facebook, especially in her group, of asking all the hard questions around death. And I will share with you guys, her community is very, I mean, there's so many answers, there's so many different perspectives, different beliefs. And it's such a beautiful thing because oftentimes somebody will say something that you're thinking, but you don't really want to say. And it opens up the conversation for us to talk about this end of life process that we're all going to face it one day. And she's found a way to take the very uncomfortable subject and make it very comfortable to talk. So I'm going to share with you guys her notes will be in the show link, so you guys can find her on social media. Definitely check out her podcast. It's a blast to listen to. Jill, I just want to say a big, big thank you, by the way, for podcasting with me this year, being a part of this book and sharing your grandmom's story. You were one of a kind person. And I'm just very grateful for our friendship. And I know that just powerful things are going to come out of people reading your chapter. So big, big, big thank you to you for all the hard work you've done.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of the book. It was a challenge for me because I do worry a little bit about my writing. It was like a thing that I had to kind of push through a little. But your encouragement definitely made me feel better about it. And then in the end, I'm actually really proud of my chapter. I think it came out really nice. So I pleased myself, and surprised myself with my writing ability. So I appreciate you giving me that little nudge to jump into that water.
Well, it's truly been an honor, and I'm sure that anybody who reads that chapter is going to walk away with a whole entire different perspective on grief. That's going to be one certainly of empowerment, but I think one that you touched on a lot through the podcast today, which is there's a lot of love and positivity that can come through our grief journey if we allow ourselves to hold space for that, to feel our emotions, allow ourselves to go through grief the way we need to, and know that we're going to look back like you and I have from our 20-year-old self and say, you know what? This too shall pass, and there is good things that can
Mhm.
come out of this. So for listeners today, thank you for joining Jill and I on this mini cast of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. The book comes out on November 23rd. Check it out. Read Jill's chapter. It's chapter number 23. I know you guys are going to get a lot out of it, and thank you for joining us again. And I'll be back with another episode here shortly with another author spotlight. Talk to you guys soon.